You are watching
You'll be
Xirtus.
going through the sync film. You could be 30 minutes, 40 minutes into the film, and something that happens briefly will tie back to something from the beginning in a profound way. And so it's like that level of attention, like what you're doing, Jake, implicit in what you're doing is assuming the best of the like awareness of your viewership, and which I think is complementary to your audience. So like, there's sometimes like with the sync miss thing where it's just more fun. Like it's like a fun ride, and there's the super duper looper and the way that the thing connects along, and you're like, oh, looper with Bruce Willis and how all of this kind of stuff. But then you have places where you're like, dude, you actually like it never it's right there and it's direct, but it was never spelled out. And so like it really like not everybody's going to be attuned to that, and not everybody's going to catch it to pay that much attention, so that they've watched this thing through and through and they see how this one part relates back to something that you
Yeah.
had said at the beginning of the communication.
And what I love is wondering at what points the audience is going to go, he did that on purpose.
Yeah.
He put that connection in that movie, and he knew because 20 minutes later it comes up again. And at what point did he not know? And then that just happened.
Because there's a problem. Like a lot of the audience goes the other way. They're like, oh, this must have been natural. This must have intentional is harder to get to for people. They're like, this must have been not even a line, because it was so real the way they said it that it must have just been natural. They ad-libbed it, or something. Like that's a natural for a lot of audience. They're like, oh, this is so good, it must be real. Not that it's like so well done, it must be intentional. Right.
Well, look at the Attic Expeditions. Is that what it was called? The one with Andros Jones and Seth Green, where Seth Green says, or Andros says magic, and he goes, "Oh, you mean magic with a K?" And it's all like it's done in this kind of mysterious way. But if you know the backstory, you know that Andros was like, "This is what we should say," and then they threw it in there, and it's like he has his associations with it. But people could look at that and they're just like, "Oh, so these guys are all in the OTO." And it's like nobody here is actually in the OTO, as far as I know. So it's
yeah. I think syllogisms are the other thing. You go back thousands of years and people have been arguing about synchromysticism, but they've been saying these are not logical inferences. And so we have to ignore these illogical inferences. And then because they're not really practical, if you don't have a lot of data, like if you can't write things down, you're trying to like keep that's
a very Spock-like thing to say, you got to have Kirk there to balance it out. So.
Well, if you have a system that can hold all of that information, like reading and writing, then you would eventually get to a point where you can assert synchromysticism from that data. But for a long time, it seemed probably a less of a priority. And so more important to focus on, logic, syllogisms versus synchromysticism.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say that I couldn't remember earlier. It's that when I was talking to Bill today about that time where I remember, this is years ago, it was just like on Facebook, you were like, I'm going to watch The Shining. Like you'd never seen The Shining before. Oh, you should take the camera off me because I want to see Jake's face when I talk to him. All
right, Jake,
that works too. But no, that you said you'd never seen The Shining, and I can't remember another instance in my life where I was like genuinely excited that somebody was going to watch a movie because I'm interested in what they're going to say about it. But I was like, ooh, Jake hasn't even seen The Shining, and he's like the ultimate sync head. What's going to happen? It was like, is something explosive going to happen? You're like, it was all right, but. Since that time, you've incorporated it in things. It's like, give me the bat, Wendy, and then you're like, here's Batman with Jack Nicholson. Like, come on, bring me the bat.
I just want to point out, I'm not Andras Jones. I'm not that guy. Andras Jones is not Andreas Nicholas. Yeah,
no, totally different person. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that's also something about movie critics is that, the more interesting a critic, the more like you don't even need to watch the movie. It's a completely different thing, when you read a critic that's like talking about what they're interested in. And so you can make something where it doesn't even matter if I've seen The Shining because if I have, it still doesn't matter because your interpretation of it is going to be your own, right? And so the more that we see different interpretations, the more that the space between the stars are mapped, right? I think that's what's good.
Yeah.
So Jake, you'd never seen The Shining until when? It's back up here.
That had to have been like 2013 or something. I don't know.
Okay.
That's
no, it's
funny
later.
because I don't remember that interaction with David.
You
Honestly,
didn't.
I
It
don't.
wasn't an interaction with me. You had shared it on Facebook. I believe it was Facebook, where you're like, "I'm going to watch The Shining for the first time."
He's
This
just
is a
rooting for you.
long time ago.
That is, my memory. I feel like I've seen The Shining when I was a kid.
Yeah,
So-
well, maybe you didn't remember it or something. But I remember you saying that you're going to watch The Shining, and I remember being excited that Jake is going to watch The Shining and talk about it.
That-
Maybe it wasn't the first
I don't remember that. I remember it
well.
differently. I remember watching The Shining when I was a kid and, a teenager,
Okay.
I feel like, that's a pretty familiar film to me.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
I don't know.
Am I tripping and I'm talking about freaking Christopher Knowles or something?
It's
That could be.
possible.
It's been a long time.
I'm constantly like, I forget like all the characters that have been involved in Sync and all the threads and, some of the stuff you've been talking about. Like even when you talk about Sync videos, I'm like, oh, Magic of a K. I haven't thought about that in like forever.
It's a
And,
long
like,
time
that's
ago.
just
Yeah,
something
well,
that I made. So
I got into this level. Like I've always been interested in synchronicity. The first synchronicity I ever had was in 1989 when it was during the World Series, and then it was Battle of the Bay. It was the Oakland A's versus the San Francisco Giants. I was 8 years old, and there was an earthquake while the game was happening, and the Bay Bridge broke in the middle. And I remember saying to the adults around me, like, "Does anyone else see this? Like, isn't that weird? Like the Bay Bridge broke, and it's Battle of the Bay." And it was like, they were like, "No, well, I don't see the big deal really." And I was like, that's bizarre. And like the rest of my life, I've always been like catching things like that, But then it was really the sinkhole, live from the Logosphere, a few shots to Shaman, like there, and and then this was before the Sync book, and also Mark Leclerc was really huge for me, and like you guys, like all like the line of that you were exploring was so inspiring and resonant. Like it just spoke to me, and I knew that I wasn't alone with that too. And even though it's like blogs or whatever, I'm like, people are like have to be being impacted by this. I mean, for me at that time, it was like kind of everything, because I was seeing what I was seeing there applied in the world around me, and it was kind of like, just relating to things, and it's like kind of shifting my perception to a place where I wasn't relating to things as topically and approaching the mundane with recognizing depth within it is like really a fulfilling thing. And that's why I think you can make the argument that that you're dealing with something that's non-demonic when you can feel it, like it's a resonant thing. Like I think that's the etymology of empathy. Like the real etymology of empathy has to do with art. It's a term that came from the art world, where when you look at a piece of art, something is transmitted, you perceive something, like that was intentional or not from the artist, but like something came through, you had an insight or whatever. So, this does that for me. So I appreciate it.
Here says, literally watching The Shining for the first time, started a few days ago. I have about 30 minutes left of the film. It's crazy good. He's giving me hot tips for here. Anything that they should be looking for,
Got 30 minutes left.
Don't
watch it while you're watching the podcast.
I have to go.
Yeah, it's pretty late, and we got like a further an hour. But you know what? Thank you for joining us from Canada, man. And like, we'll make sure that people watch those Sync films. We'll put some links in there. I appreciate it.
And watch Sync Jack as well.
Sync Jack.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I just want to say before you go, The Red Door is pretty good. I like The Red Door.
Yeah. I mean, that I feel like is a deep cut that I feel like not many people have seen.
Yeah. Well, Jake, can we have you on again sometime? It's just such a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Totally. And we'll do this again.
We'll see you soon, man. Take care.
Yeah, thank you for it's nice to talk about some of this stuff with people who are familiar with it and have some interesting feedback.
Despite what people might think for the first time, which is also pretty funny. You'd think we'd have like this way better orchestrated if we're running a cabal, but thank you. We'll see you soon.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Bye, Jake.
Jake is based Jake. That was fun. I like Jake a lot.
Oh, he's great.
I just think it's funny though, like that isn't the goal that we should like work ourselves into the work, the like you're like eventually that's kind of the point is that you're more and more integrated into the sync because you're syncing so hard with the syncs that you have to.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you
You've
know, he's
won
just
at that
been
point.
he just keeps putting this stuff out. He just puts it out there. It's not up to him what people do with it, where it goes, how it goes. It's just like just putting out what he's interested in. And you know, that's where it's at. That's like real artist stuff, you know, where you could just, you know, it's out of my hands now, you know.